Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour à todos. Your Excellency, President Ernest Bai Koroma, Head of ECOWAS Observation Mission in the Gambia. Ladies and gentlemen, Head of Electoral Observation Mission in the Gambia, distinguished former president who have come to honor this electoral event in the Gambia, I mean His Excellency General Olusegun Obasanjo, who we daily call Baba, former President of Federal Republic of Nigeria, head of the mission, Commonwealth Observation Group. I would like us to make the name international outside Africa and personally keep for you what they call in French le droit d'auteur. His Excellency Ngalema Motlanthe, former President of South Africa and the head of African Union Observation Mission in the Gambia. His Excellency Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, former President of Federal Republic of Nigeria, here in the Gambia as head of West African Elder Forum. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, former President of Republic of Ghana and head of Asia Observation Mission in the Gambia. Mr. Norbert Nezer, head of European Union Observation. His Excellency Mohamed Saleh Al-Nadif, representative of UN Secretary General in West Africa and Sahel. His Excellency Kadri Desiré Ouattara, our boss, former President of ECOWAS Commission, member of Western African Elder Forum, honorable members of ECOWAS Parliament, distinguished ambassador accredited to ECOWAS and representative of the organization, distinguished member of ECOWAS Community Court of Justice, expert from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Election Management Body of ECOWAS member, journalist and communication expert, ECOWAS electoral observers, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank God for the safe return of all of us without any major incident. On behalf of the President of the ECOWAS Commission, His Excellency Mr. Jean-Claude Cassibrou, I would like to express my deep gratitude for your sense of sacrifice with aims at promoting democracy in our region through good electoral governance. I would like to respectfully salute the leadership of our head of mission, the former President of Sierra Leone, His Excellency Ernest Bai Koroma, who has enabled us to bring this mission to a successful conclusion. I would also like to report to you, Excellencies, a secret success story. The story goes as follows. At the beginning of my duty as Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, from 1st March 2018, I have suddenly projected to Sierra Leone on 3rd March 2018 to give technical support for observation mission led by former President of Liberia, Professor Amos Sowore. His Excellency Ernest Bai Koroma was the incumbent head of state of Sierra Leone at the end of the second tenure. His political party was contesting the presidential election, with 3 others in what we call general elections in West Africa. During the elections, I had the opportunity to meet 3 other former heads of state, leading observation mission for various organizations. They were at that time in Freetown, His Excellency Ngalema Motlanthe, former president of South Africa, a humble man. There was there Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, former president of Federal Republic of Nigeria, another humble man. There was there John Dramani Mahama, former president of Republic of Ghana, another humble man again. And Honorable Senator Edwin Suno of Liberia, ECOWAS Parliament, were also present. The post-electoral period in Sierra Leone was very tense, with much violence on the ground. However, the solution came from the incumbent head of state, His Excellency Bai Koroma, here present. Everybody was anxious, going in and out of the State House and the residence of President Ernest Bai Koroma. Finally, President Koroma and his political party accepted the result that came out from the ballot. President Ernest Bai Koroma permit me, with authorization of the former head of state here present, to declare publicly that you are a very good, humble man, trusting in God Almighty. Today, I cannot express my happiness at the end of my mandate of 4 years as ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, after 14 presidential elections in our region, to be with all these fabulous and charismatic head of state of Africa present here for the Gambia presidential election. I'm happy and very pleased. Perhaps, maybe one day, with your blessing, of your excellency.
We want you to land. Let us hear it.
As a retired general,
President.
maybe one day I will be as Baba.
Okay, I will use this.
Elected president
Okay.
of the 37th state of Nigeria. I'm very happy and would like you to get up together and clap for all these fabulous and charismatic former presidents. We have some statements. I know that Baba is coming a little late. That is why I reserve the clapping for him at his arrival.
So it was for him. It was
Ladies and gentlemen, observers, as you may have guessed, ECOWAS methodology for election observation from one country to another in our community. We are therefore at the stage of reporting on what you and ourselves were able to observe in the electoral field in accordance with the provision of 2001 Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance. Your finding and observation at the various polling stations where you were able to visit were used to write the substance of the preliminary declaration electoral governance that could be used for the benefit of other countries. We have costly and tedious in terms of counting because of the electoral material. We could, if necessary, make a prospective study of this electoral process and see the possibilities of its implementation in other countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that this successful election will close the dark page of the Gambia's democratic process for good, with a view to national cohesion and the beginning of development of this milepost named the Gambia. It is on this note of hope that I would like once again, on behalf of the President of ECOWAS Commission, to thank you and wish you, each of us, a safe return to our respective country. In anticipation, I will wish you all the best for the new year's 2022, which we are devoting, negotiating with God. Long life to the West African community. I thank you. Obrigado. Je vous remercie infiniment.
Your welcome address. Now we will invite the head of ECOWAS Electoral Observation Mission. The head of ECOWAS Electoral Observation Mission, His Excellency Ernest Bai Koroma, former President of Sierra.
Thank you very much, Coordinator. Let me start by thanking General Vianze for the complimentary comments he has made about me, and also publicly wish him the very best. This being his final major mission that he is conducting, he has not clearly landed in his final statement on what we should be expected to do for him. Maybe in the not too distant future, we will be somewhere in the country within the West Coast where he will also be a contestant for the great position. But thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Head of Missions, here present, His Excellency Ngalima Motlanti, representing the AU, His Excellency John Mahama, Issa, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, the Commonwealth, His Excellency Goodluck Jonathan, and Kadri Ouedraogo, the Committee of Elders, the EU, the members of ECONEC, ambassadors of ECOWAS, members of Parliament of ECOWAS, members of the Court of Justice of ECOWAS, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you all to these preliminary declaration meetings. For ECOWAS, I will make this declaration. In the exercise of its mandate under Section 46 of the Constitution of the Gambia and Section 40 of the Elections Act, the Independent Electoral Commission, IEC, on 1st October 2021, informed the general public that the election to the office of President of the Republic of the Gambia will be conducted on Saturday, 4th December 2021. Pursuant to the provisions of the ECOWAS Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance 2001, His Excellency Jean-Claude Cassibrou, President of the Commission of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, deployed an Electoral Observation Mission, EOM, to observe the presidential election in the Gambia as part of the ECOWAS support to the democratic process in the country. The EOM team was led by me, Anes Nkrumah, former president of the Republic of Sierra Leone, and comprised of officials from the ministries of Foreign Affairs of the ECOWAS member states, electoral experts from the electoral commissions of the ECOWAS member states, members of the ECOWAS Parliament, ECOWAS Court, as well as ambassadors accredited to ECOWAS, journalists, and members of the civil society. The mission was supported by the Office of the Permanent Representative of the ECOWAS Commission in the Gambia, Her Excellency Mrs. Vaba Gefro, and the technical team from the ECOWAS Commission led by General Francis Behanze, Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. Commitments and support to the electoral process. Since the last election in 2016, ECOWAS remained in the forefront of supporting the democratic stabilization process and national cohesion in Gambia through the instrumentality of ECOWAS mission in the Gambia ECOMIG. The mission, which was first deployed on the 26th January 2017, has continued its mandate of securing the state and protecting the citizenry in collaboration with the country's security forces. Subsequently, in March 2017, the ECOWAS Permanent Mission was established and a new special representative of the President of ECOWAS appointed. This is with the objective of engaging with the relevant stakeholders in promoting institutional reform processes with specific reference to security sector reform with the recruitment and deployment of a senior defense and security advisor to the preparation of the security sector reform strategy and national defense strategy. Furthermore, ECOWAS has continued to implement high-impact programs interim with the Gambian National Development Plan 2018 to 2021. Funds for the ECOWAS EU Peace and Stability Mandate Program were utilized to achieve this objective. The 4th December 2021 presidential election is a historical moment consolidating democracy and social cohesion in the Gambia. In this context, and in keeping with the provisions of Article 42 to 44B of the 1999 ECOWAS Protocol relating to the mechanism for conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping and security, Article 12 of the 2001 Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance, and Article 53C of the 2008 ECOWAS Conflict Prevention Framework, the ECOWAS Commission deployed a pre-election fact-finding mission to the Gambia from 1st to 7th August 2021. Moreover, in keeping with its tradition of supporting member states organizing elections, ECOWAS demonstrated its commitment to support the government and the people of the Gambia by organizing training and consultative engagements for the relevant stakeholders from the 13th to the 16th September 2021. The training, which held at 2 regions of the country, namely the West Coast and the Upper River regions, focused on the use of dialogue and mediation as tools for preventing and mitigating electoral-related conflicts and disputes. As part of its preventive diplomacy activities in support of peaceful presidential elections, ECOWAS Commission launched a national peace campaign and dialogue on democratic reforms aimed at promoting youth participation in the political processes in the Gambia from the 25th to the 27th October 2021. In collaboration with the African Union Secretariat of the African Governance Architecture and the National Youth Council of the Gambia. ECOWAS also followed up on most of the recommendations made by the pre-electoral fact-finding mission to ensure its implementation by the concerned institutions and stakeholders. His Excellency John Clare Cassibru, President of ECOWAS Commission, was present at a stakeholders forum on the 26th October 2021, where political contestants for the office of President in the Gambia committed in the presence of national and international stakeholders to conduct a peaceful and violent free elections. To effectively monitor and observe the presidential elections on 4th December 2021, the ECOWAS Commission deployed a core team of 4 experts, as well as 12 long-term and 62 short-term observers. The Electoral campaign security, and the media. The mission took note of the signing of the Janjabura Peace Pledge that was signed by political parties in the period leading up to the elections and displayed exceptional commitment to the code. The campaign took place in all the regions of the country in a peaceful and conducive atmosphere. Political parties and their candidates actively carried out their campaign and had the opportunity to disseminate their manifestos and programs to the electorate. The main method of campaign was through street rallies based on agreed schedule among political parties and candidates. The mission notes that security protection was provided to all the presidential candidates during the election campaigns and throughout the electoral process. The mission notes the high level of citizen mobilization, advocacy, and sensitization carried out by the civil society in promoting a conducive environment for credible, inclusive, and violence-free elections. Election litigation. The pre-election litigations were concluded in a manner that encouraged litigants and the Independent Electoral Commission to acknowledge and respect the independence of the judiciary in electoral dispute adjudication. This development reinforced the role of the judiciary in the resolution of electoral disputes in marked difference to the previous elections. The pre-electoral consultations, deployments, and observations. Consultations. Upon my arrival in the Gambia on the 1st December 2021 as head of mission, I met with His Excellency Adam Barrow, President of the Gambia, who is also a candidate of the elections, during which he briefed the mission on the state of preparedness of the elections. President Nkrumah also held consultations with the Honorable Mariam Jack Denton, the Speaker of Parliament, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Gambia, Hassan Boubacar Jallow, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation and the Gambians, the Minister of Interior, the Minister of Justice, and the Chairman of the Independent Electoral Commission. The head of mission also met with the candidates and representatives of political parties competing in the elections. He also held consultations before and after the elections with heads of observation missions of the AU, His Excellency Ngalima Motlanthe, former President of the Republic of South Africa, the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, ISA, His Excellency John Mahama, former President of the Republic of Ghana, the Commonwealth, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of the Republic of Nigeria, representatives of the Elders Committee, His Excellency Goodluck Jonathan, former President of Nigeria, and His Excellency Kadri Ouedraogo, former President of ECOWAS Commission, as well as the head of the observation mission of the European Union, the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commission, and the head of the other missions the SRSG, and other electoral and civil society groups. Following the various consultations, the head of mission encouraged the electoral management bodies to ensure the conduct of free, fair, credible elections, and urged the political parties and the candidates to enhance their voter sensitization, mobilization, and campaign, and admonish the Gambian citizens to come out on election day to fulfill their civic responsibilities. Deployment. Consequent upon a pre-deployment briefing session organized by ECOWAS technical team, 74 observers in 48 teams were deployed to the 7 regions. Opening, conduct of elections, and vote counting. After careful analysis of the information received from the observers deployed in the field, the mission noted the following: the early arrival of polling officials at polling stations, which enabled voting to commence at the stipulated time of 8:00 a.m. in most of the polling stations visited. The presence in sufficient quantities of electoral material in all the polling stations across the country. The visible presence of security agents, 2 security personnel per polling station, discharging their duties in accordance with the provisions of the law. The efficient and professional conduct of polling officials who demonstrated adequate knowledge of their duties. Except for the IEC staff, COVID health protocols were not observed in over 70% of the polling stations visited, although provisions was made by the IEC for hand sanitizers and masks. There was a gender mix, with women well represented as polling officials and party agents and as security officers in some polling stations. The agents of the National People's Party, NPP, the Gambian Democratic Congress, the GDC, the United Democratic Party, the UDP, and the People's Democratic Organization for Independence and Socialism, PDOIS, were present at almost all the polling stations visited, while the agents of ISAFAL and the National Unity Party, NUP, were only present in some polling stations. There was the use of indelible ink to indicate that voters had cast their votes. All voters were requested to present their voter card before they were allowed to vote at all the polling stations observed. Priority was given to vulnerable persons, including the elderly, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and necessary assistance were afforded to persons with disability to enable them cast their ballots. The setup of most of the polling stations visited ensured secrecy of the ballot. The international observers from the AU, EU, ISA, Red Cross, Commonwealth, NDI, and observers, including Gambia peace ambassadors, WANEP, were met on the field. There was an impressive turnout of voters at the opening of the poll in most of the polling stations. Polls closed in all the polling stations visited at the stipulated time of 5 p.m. The vote counting and tallying process were carried out in a transparent, very simple and professional manner in full view of party agents, observers, and the security agents. There was cooperation and non-adversary relationship between the electoral officers and party agents, which facilitated ease and efficient conduct of the election. The conclusion. The mission is impressed with the simple but very effective voting system based on the use of marbles being dropped in each candidate's ballot drum, thereby preventing spoiled ballots or invalid votes. The mission is appreciative on the conditions in which the elections were organized, as well as the speed and the transparency in the coalition, transmission, and the declaration of the provisional results by the IEC. Consequently, ECOWAS mission congratulates the government of the people of the Gambia and all stakeholders for their efforts so far in ensuring the elections was conducted in a peaceful atmosphere. The mission congratulates and invites the incoming president to increase efforts to meet the challenges of social stability, economic recovery, democratic governance and consolidation, peace and security in an inclusive manner. The mission congratulates the IEC, the security forces, and all the stakeholders involved in the management of the electoral process and salutes the great political maturity that Gambians have displayed throughout this process. The mission takes note of the declaration made by the Gambian Independent Electoral Commission on Sunday, 5th December, by announcing in the public media the results of the elections. Despite the controversies, accusations, and counter-accusations, and the rejections on the early Sunday, December results by the three presidential candidates, ECOWAS mission confirms that the electoral process was calm, peaceful, with no major incidents reported. The mission will provide a comprehensive report at the end of the entire process. However, at this stage, the mission will like to prefer the following recommendations. To the IEC. The IEC should continue to communicate developments regarding electoral process to the general public and promptly share information in order to discourage misinformation through social media and other means. The capacity of the Independent Electoral Commission should be reinforced by establishing a legal unit and the appointment of communication and database management experts. To the government, the constitutional and electoral review process should be revitalized to promote democracy and consolidate democratic governance in the country. The mission appeals to the candidates in the presidential elections to respect the results of the elections and urge them to resort, if the need arises, to the legal channels to resolve any electoral dispute. Lastly, the ECOWAS Observer Mission, through the long-term observers and the Office of the Resident Representative of the President of the ECOWAS Commission in the Gambia, will continue to monitor the post-electoral development and expresses appreciation to the competent authorities of the Gambia for the measures taken to facilitate the deployment of observers for the election of the 4th December 2021. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, heads of missions here present, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, His Excellency Ernest Bai Koroma, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, His Excellency Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, and all the eminent observers here present. I now proceed to present the preliminary findings on behalf of the African Union Election Observation Mission. At the invitation of the government of the Republic of the Gambia and the Independent Electoral Commission, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, deployed the African Union Election Observation Mission to the country's presidential election that was held on the 4th of December 2021. The mission was charged with the responsibility of observing, assessing, and reporting on the preparations for the election in line with the relevant AU instruments for democratic elections. The main objective of the mission was to conduct an impartial, independent, and objective assessment of the 2021 election in line with the AU and international principles for democratic elections and the national legal framework governing elections in the Gambia. The AU Election Observation Mission was led by myself as former President of the Republic of South Africa and comprised 9 long-term observers and 60 short-term observers. The observers were drawn from African ambassadors accredited to the African Union, election management bodies, independent electoral and governance experts, and civil society organizations from 30 African countries. It was supported by the technical team from the AU Commission and the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. To achieve its objectives, the AU Electoral Observation Mission undertook the following activities. Prior to the deployment of observers, the AU deployed a pre-election and needs assessment mission from the 12th to 17th September 2021 to assess the context within which the 4 December 2021 election will take place. The assessment mission recommended the deployment of long and short-term observers in the Gambia and provided financial and technical assistance to the IEC. Based on the assessment report, the AU deployed a long-term mission on 20th October 2021. The LOTs were joined by short-term observers on the 22nd of November 2021. Prior to the deployment, both the long and short-term observer undertook 3 days of briefing and orientation on the use of technology in election observation and election observation methodology. They were briefed by Gambian electoral stakeholders on the political and security environment, the legal framework for the election dispute resolution mechanisms, state of preparedness of the Independent Electoral Commission, role of civil society, women and youth groups' participation in the elections. This preliminary statement reflects the AU Election Observation Mission's assessment of the 2021 presidential election up to the close of polling on the 4th December 2021 and the immediate post-election period. A final and comprehensive report will be released within a month from the official announcement of final election results. Preliminary findings under general political context. The presidential election held on 4 December 2021 is at once the Gambia's 6th election since the return to democratic rule after the 1994 military coup, and the first since the defeat of the former President Yahya Jammeh in 2016. The election took place against the backdrop of double failure at crafting a new constitution and at passing a new electoral law. The election also took place within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, it did not affect the timelines and preparations for the elections. Under legal framework, a comprehensive legal and constitutional framework without ambiguities is essential to the administration and democratic elections and ensuring that a country upholds its domestic, regional, continental, and international obligations. The legal framework for the conduct of elections in the Gambia includes Chapter 5 of the 1997 Constitution and Electoral Act, previously Decree 78 of 1996, the Elections Act of 2001, Elections Amendment Act of 2015, and Elections Amendment Act of 2017 to regulate political parties, registration, and major electoral activities. The African Union Election Observation Mission notes that the legal framework for the 2021 election is generally in line with international and regional norms and standards for the conduct of democratic elections, as it protects fundamental freedoms of association, assembly, and political participation. The Constitution also recognizes and guarantees fundamental human rights and freedoms, including freedom of speech, conscience, assembly, association and movement, and political rights. It further provides principles for which, how, and when elections are conducted, universal adult suffrage, and the establishment of an independent electoral body. However, some of the gaps in the legal framework include the absence of a constitutional provision for presidential term limits, absence of procedures for announcing final results of a presidential election, and absence of affirmative action to promote women's and youth's political participation and inclusion. The electoral system. The electoral system in the Gambia is based on the first past the post or simple majority system. In line with Article 63 of the Constitution of 1997, a president serves a term, a 5-year term, once elected. However, the AU Election Observation Mission notes that the current constitution has no presidential term limit. The homegrown voting system using drums, tokens, sand, and sieves has been in use since 1960. Although the voting system is simple, effective, and efficient, some stakeholders that the AU Election Observation Mission consulted have proposed replacing it with paper ballots. The reasons given for the proposals to replace the voting system with paper ballots are projected costs and logistic factors when the number of candidates increases. The AU Election Observation Mission noted the proposals under the Elections Bill to change the electoral and voting systems. The AU Election Observation Mission is of the view that the voting system is a unique invention and all efforts should be made to maintain and improve it. Under electoral administration and preparation, the IEC is established under Section 42 of the 1997 Constitution as amended as an independent constitutional body responsible for organizing the elections. The budget of the IEC is provided by the state upon approval by the National Assembly. It may also receive grants, donations, and fees from groups other than political parties. It is also expected to submit an audited statement of accounts to the National Assembly at the end of each financial year. The mission noted that the IEC does not have a legal department and has to hire private attorneys in situations where cases are filed against it in court. This is reactive and not proactive on matters of law which could be addressed by in-house legal advisors. On voter registration and voters' role, the registration of voters is provided for under Articles 39 and 43 of the Constitution of 1997 and Section 12 of the Elections Act of 2009. Voter registration requirements are that you be a citizen of the Gambia, have attained or will attain the age of 18 years at the time of the election, produce an identification document, birth certificate, a Gambian passport, a national identity card, or an attestation certified by a district chief or village alcalde. Registration is constituency-based, meaning that a person should register in a constituency where they reside or were born. The voter registration was initially scheduled to take place on 14th January to 26 February as per the elections calendar. However, logistical challenges relating to the procurement of materials and equipment for the registration delayed the process. The IEC carried out a voter registration drive from 29th May to 11th July 2021, which concluded with 987,824 voters registered. After verification and post-matching, the final list of registered voters was reduced to 962,157, representing approximately 96.2% of the projected 1 million eligible voters. Of the total registered voters, 545,318, which represents 57%, are females, and 416,839, which represents 43%, are males. Political party registration and nomination of candidates. Article 60 of the 1997 Constitution provides for the IEC to register or deregister political parties. There are currently 18 registered political parties in the Gambia, representing a 100% increase from the 2016 registration, where only 9 political parties were registered. The mission notes that only 5 of the registered parties, plus an independent, contested this election. Article 46 of the 1997 Constitution provides that an election for the office of the President should be conducted 3 months before the expiration of the term of the sitting President. It further provides for the IEC to determine the date for the nomination of candidates and for holding the election. Nominations for the 2021 election took place from 30 October to 5 November 2021. In line with the 2017 Elections Amendment Act, candidates had to pay a deposit of 10,000 Gambian dollars. The mission notes that this amount is much lower than the 500,000 Gambian dollars paid by aspiring candidates in the 2016 election. The mission noted that all 6 candidates signed the Code of Conduct, pledging commitment to a peaceful election. The mission commends the IEC for initiating the peace pledge for candidates and reinforcing the Code of Conduct. Under campaigns and campaign finance, the official campaigns started on 7 November and ended on 2nd December 2021 at midnight in compliance with the law. The mission observed that the campaigns took place in a peaceful environment. Campaign messages focused on peace and security, infrastructural development, education, health, youth development, vocational training, women empowerment, entrepreneurship support, and economic stability. The police were equally proactive in monitoring the observance of approved campaign schedules to ensure no political party violated the schedule. The mission received consents from various stakeholders regarding private funding of political parties, which can compromise the playing field. The media. The Independent Electoral Commission has the mandate to ensure that each candidate has equal access to the public media, including radio and television. The mission observed that the Gambia enjoys an improved, vibrant, and diverse media, which allows for free expression of opinions, with 6 active newspapers and over 50 radio stations and 8 television stations. The mission noted that the Information Bill was signed into law on 25 August 2021. The Access to Information Act allows members of the public to obtain information from public institutions and ensure transparency and accountability, and an opportunity for the citizens to participate in the governance of the country. The mission observed that media houses such as Star TV, GRTS, and Paradise TV covered election-related programs, campaigns, and political adverts. The GRTS also provided a 25 minutes per day platform to all political parties and candidates to publicize their policies in 2 languages. The mission received concerns about hate speech and misinformation circulating through the media, particularly social media platforms. On participation of women, in the Gambia, women represent more than half of the population, that's 50.5%, and comprise 57% of all voters. The mission noted that although there is a demographic advantage for women in the Gambia, this does not translate to their nomination in leadership positions. Of the 6 presidential candidates, none was a woman. Mary Sok, an independent presidential aspirant, became the first Gambian woman to file a nomination for the presidency, although her application did not meet the required criteria for nomination. On election day findings, the voting process was peaceful, with polling staff and voters showing commitment and a sense of professionalism. Party agents were present in some polling centers visited, while the presence of citizen observers was not consistent. International observers were also present. Party agents and observers were given access to the polling stations without any restrictions. Significant participation of women as polling staff was observed. There was no consistent compliance with COVID-19 prevention measures. The mission deployed 70 observers in 15 constituencies across the country. They visited a total of 298 polling stations on election day to observe the opening, voting, closing, and counting procedures in their areas of deployment, with 55% in urban and 45% in rural areas. Overall, the atmosphere throughout election day remained peaceful. Opening of polling. The mission observed opening procedures at 24 polling stations across 19 constituencies. The mission notes that 87% of polling stations visited opened on time at 8 sharp. The polling staff followed the required opening procedures and guidelines. The mission noted that the security officers were present at polling stations and acted professionally. The mission observed that there were well-controlled queues outside all the polling stations visited before and during opening process. Election materials. The mission noted that materials were delivered in advance in most polling stations visited and were insufficient quantities. Polling stations. The mission notes that most polling stations were easily accessible to the voters. The layout of the polling stations promoted easy flow of voters. In some polling stations, voters were divided into streams in a manner that protected the secrecy of the ballot and allowed also for easy flow. Election personnel. The polling staff were generally competent in carrying out their duties and demonstrated a sense of commitment. The mission commends the Independent Electoral Commission and candidates for deploying women and youth as polling officials and party candidates agents. observers and party candidate agents. The mission noted the presence of other international observer missions at some polling stations visited. The mission also noted the presence of citizen observers in most stations visited. The participation of citizen observers was crucial to enhance the credibility and transparency of the electoral process. The mission notes that party and candidate agents were present at most of the polling stations visited and could carry out their mandate without hindrances and with a high degree of tolerance. Voting procedures. The mission noted that voting proceeded uninterrupted in most polling stations visited throughout the day. Where there was an interruption, it was for less than 10 minutes. The reason for the interruption was usually because the bell was not heard, prompting verification by the polling staff accompanied by party or candidate agents and the voter. The secrecy of the vote was guaranteed in all polling stations visited. The mission noted that priority and assistance were extended to persons with disability, the elderly, pregnant women and nursing mothers, as well as other persons with special needs. Closing the polls, most stations observed closing at 17 hours. All voters in the queue at closing time were allowed to cast their vote. The mission also noted that ballot reconciliation was done at the polling station at the end of polling. Counting of votes. Counting took place at the polling stations where the results were published. The counting process took place in a peaceful atmosphere at all polling stations visited by the mission. All the necessary documentation was completed and results were posted at the polling station after candidate agents were provided with a copy of the results form. The mission noted the presence of both citizen and international observers during closing of the election day operations. And conclusion. The mission commends the government and the people of the Gambia, the Independent Electoral Commission, political parties, candidates, and their supporters for their peaceful conduct before and during polling. The mission is hopeful that the peaceful character of the 2021 presidential election will consolidate this tradition. The mission further encourages all stakeholders to sustain the prevailing peace in the remaining phase of the electoral process. Based on its pre-election assessment and election day findings, the mission concludes that the election was conducted in a peaceful and democratic political environment and conforms to national and international standards. And under recommendations, the mission offers the following preliminary recommendations for improvement of future electoral processes in the Gambia. 1. Efforts to be made to pass the electoral bill and continue constitutional reforms. 2. The government should enact laws that provide for public funding and enforce regulations governing private funding of political parties. 3. Political parties are encouraged to take more deliberate steps to adopt affirmative action measures aimed at increasing the participation of women, youth, and people living with disabilities in decision-making structures. 4. Introduce legal requirements such as mandatory quotas to enhance women and youth political participation. Fifth, the IEC to establish a legal department to attend to litigations and speedily. And lastly, as I conclude, the mission calls on all stakeholders to remain calm during and after the electoral process. The mission urges any stakeholders dissatisfied with the electoral process to seek redress through the established legal and institutional mechanisms. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Your Excellencies and dear brothers, heads of observer missions for ECOWAS, AU, ECELA, and head of West African Elders Forum for Peace, and my brother, Commissioner, ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. The people of the Gambia, members of the media, fellow observers, members of the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for coming to this Commonwealth Observer Group press conference. The Commonwealth is honored to have been invited by the Independent Electoral Commission of the Gambia to stand in solidarity with all Gambians through this significant election, the 5th presidential election under the 1997 Constitution. Our group, which was constituted by the Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland, QC, comprises experts drawn from the political, legal, media, civil society, and electoral fields across various Commonwealth regions. We have been in the Gambia since 26 November, and we hope to depart on the 9th of December 2021. We deployed our observers to all the administrative divisions of the country on the 2nd of December to observe this presidential election. Our teams were stationed in Banjul, Basse, Brikama, Janjaburo, Karewa, and Mansakunko. Prior to our deployment, we were briefed by various stakeholders, including the Independent Electoral Commission, IEC, the Inspector General of Police, political parties and candidates, civil society organizations, and media houses. We also established working relationships and exchanged information with other international observers and local citizen observer groups. Our team sought to obtain a representative sample of the process so as to enable us to arrive at a broad overview. This is an interim statement and as such provides an initial assessment of our key findings and initial impressions of the exercise. The final report setting out our full findings on the entire process and our recommendations in greater detail will be submitted to the Commonwealth Secretary General. I would like to begin by highlighting a number of positive aspects of the environment in the lead up to these elections. Let me begin by commending the IEC for conducting this election despite the great difficulties imposed by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic globally. We note that various COVID mitigation measures were put in place by the IEC to ensure that these elections were conducted safely and securely, though we note some challenges were encountered, which I will comment on shortly in our assessment of election day. Other features of the electoral process are also worthy of commendation, such as the marble system of voting. I will comment on this also shortly. We note the peaceful environment that has prevailed in the pre-election period. We commend the various commitments by political parties to foster a peaceful environment in the lead-up to the 2021 presidential election. These include adherence to the Inter-Party Committee's Memorandum of Understanding, the signing by all 18 parties of the Janjaburo Peace Accord on 25 September, as well as the commitment by all presidential candidates to a code of conduct, which they signed on 11 November. It is our hope that they will continue to live up to these commitments even in the post-election period. While the electoral framework does largely provide for competitive democratic elections, it is noted that the legal framework for these elections has remained unchanged since the previous election in 2016, and that unsuccessful attempts were made to implement a number of constitutional and electoral reforms. We nevertheless note and laud efforts are taken forward some reforms which include the enactment of the Access to Information Act assented to by the President on the 1st July 2021, the establishment and appointment of members of the National Human Rights Commission when it became operational in 2019, the independence granted to senior management of the National Radio and TV to assure free and equal coverage to candidates, enhancement of the functional independence of the IEC so that it only reports to the National Assembly. Our role as observers is also to look at areas where we might be able to provide recommendations for improvement. Prior to Election Day, the IEC had provided assurances of its preparedness and readiness to conduct the election as scheduled, including recruitment and training of polling staff, distribution of materials, and other logistics. The early adoption of an election calendar is to be commended and contributed to a well-managed process. It was also laudable that the IEC made available disaggregated data on some key aspects of the process. For example, a breakdown of the gender of registered voters. The IEC took the group through the process: registration, election preparedness, voting exercise, and result tallying. The group was satisfied that many aspects of the election could be conducted in a professional manner. However, some concerns were conveyed to our group during our various consultations with stakeholders about the capacity of the IEC as well as their communication strategy. We will provide recommendations on improvements that can be made in our final report. We note that the judiciary enjoys a high level of confidence among Gambians. As an illustration of its independence, a number of petitions filed by some candidates who were unsuccessful during the nomination phase against the IEC were ruled in favor of those candidates. The group was able to observe some campaign rallies which were colorful, robust, and peaceful. They were like carnivals. We commend the IEC and police initiative to implement a campaign schedule to allow each presidential candidate's supporters to have sufficient time and space for their supporters to campaign freely, while noting that there were a few minor incidents. This scheduling has by and large contributed to a peaceful process. We commend the efforts made to provide security for all the presidential candidates throughout the campaign period. Our group notes alleged reports of vote buying by some candidates and political parties. We also noted some use of hate speech and inflammatory language during campaign events and on social media. Elections Watch observers also reported an increase in the visibility of civic and voter education efforts by the IEC, LCCE, and civil society organizations and others ahead of the 4th December polls. The general feeling is that the media's responsibility to educate and inform citizens was an improvement as compared to previous elections. The group notes that press freedom is generally respected as provided by the Constitution. The press seemed to be free to cover the campaigns and elections without intimidation. This too is an improvement on previous elections. The Gambia has come a long way. However, media stakeholders reported a lack of adequate media access to the IEC. This could have contributed to a lack of clarity in the country on certain issues and fueled pockets of misinformation and disinformation, especially on social media. It is recommended that the IEC sets up a robust communication unit that the public and press can send complaints to, as well as seek clarification on issues pertaining to elections. Media stakeholders also raised concerns about the use of hate speech and inflammatory language by senior politicians during the campaign period. We encourage political parties to adhere to all aspects of the Code of Conduct, to report abuses to the IEC, and for the IEC to act on those complaints. Each of our teams was present for the opening of the polling station and observed throughout the day of the election as many polling stations as possible. We watched the closing of the voting. Where possible, our observers tracked the process of conveying the ballot drums to the counting centers and watched the counting. We were impressed by the enthusiasm with which the Gambian people exercised their democratic rights. We noticed that even before 8 a.m., voters queued up at polling stations in a peaceful and orderly manner. Our observers reported that the opening of polls generally occurred on time and that all pre-poll procedures were, on the whole, adhered to. Conduct of the polls. Polling staff were efficient, meticulous, and highly transparent in the conduct of their duties. While noting the concern were raised in some instances surrounding the issue of marbles not fitting into the mouth of the ballot drums, it was noted that the IEC acknowledged the problem and instructed polling staff to address it. This is an issue we will reflect further on and consider offering recommendations on how to address it if necessary. While COVID-19 protocols were adhered to by polling staff, it was noteworthy that this was not always the case by the voters. Large number of voters were witnessed voting, and it was pleasing to note the significant presence of women and youth among voters and polling staff. Priority was accorded to pregnant and lactating women, persons with disabilities, and others, though this was managed inconsistently, with some stations having separate queues for priority voters while others did not. Party agents were present in all polling stations observed and were diligent in the conduct of their duties. Security was present at every polling station observed. They were professional and carried out their duties diligently. Observers noted national security personnel deployed in most of their areas, and they should be commended for their role in maintaining peace during this period. Due to the unique nature of voting, it was noted that polling booths were sealed off with curtains to ensure the secrecy of the ballot. This was satisfactorily implemented in most cases. We would like to thank all international and domestic observer groups we met on election day for the cooperation and exchange of views on the unfolding process. As chairperson, I visited the election situation room at the Coco Ocean Hotel, run by the Civil Society Organization Coalition on Elections in partnership with WANEP, ECOWAS, UNOWAS, and the Gambia National Human Rights Commission. Some of our observers also managed to visit other situation rooms, including the information center operated by the Election Watch with support from NDI. These initiatives should continue to be encouraged as they enhance transparency and provide a national perspective on key data emerging from the electoral process, especially on election day. This instills a level of confidence in the electoral process. It was observed that those who were in the queue at the 5 p.m. close of polls were allowed to vote. The close and count followed due process with a high degree of transparency for which IEC and its polling staff should be commended. I commend the people of the Gambia for the largely peaceful, calm, and orderly manner in which they cast their vote on 4th December. I also wish to acknowledge the IEC for its efficient conduct of the polls across the country. The people of the Gambia have once again demonstrated patience and commitment to their democracy. We appeal to them to maintain the same commitment in the post-election period, and as the Gambia prepares to return to the polls in April 2022 for the legislative elections. It is the view of the Commonwealth Observer Group that this election was conducted in a credible, transparent, and inclusive manner. We congratulate and commend the people of Gambia for reaffirming their faith in the principles of democracy. Despite the various areas where we have recommended improvements for future elections, it is our considered assessment that they did not materially affect the conduct of this election. The Gambia's unique marble voting system has once again allowed all Gambians to vote, who voted, to do so in a transparent and efficient manner. While we note that there are different views on the value of this system, we urge further dialogue to ensure that all Gambians are able to reflect thoroughly on this, as well as other areas within the context of the unimplemented reforms that will need to be addressed in the next electoral cycle. As the result process has now concluded, we hope that the peaceful atmosphere that has prevailed thus far throughout the electoral process will continue. We reiterate our call on all political parties, their candidates, their supporters, and other stakeholders in the electoral process to continue to show restraint and magnanimity and to uphold their pre-election commitment to peace with the same spirit of national solidarity. We believe the people of the Gambia deserve that from their elected representatives and other leaders. The Commonwealth will remain engaged with the people of the Gambia in the journey to support all efforts in consolidating democracy in this country. Let me conclude by reiterating the desire that all Gambians, especially the candidates who contested the presidential election, continue to uphold their commitment to peace. It was a special honor for me and my team to be in the Gambia at this important time, and we thank you, all the people of Gambia, for your hospitality. We trust that our work will contribute to the strengthening of democracy, good governance, and the rule of law in the Gambia. At this juncture, my own personal observation. This election was very heavily observed. I believe that maybe for the first time, we have 5 former African presidents observing election in Gambia at this time. My country, Nigeria, I understand when I try to find out, I understand the highest number of former presidents we ever had for an election is 3. So you can see here in Gambia, small is attractive. We continue to follow the process, and our final report containing our conclusions and recommendations will be made public in a few weeks. We hope that our recommendations will be helpful to all stakeholders in strengthening democracy in the Gambia. I thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, former presidents, distinguished and all invited guests, and ladies and gentlemen here. This is the preliminary statement by ASA, which is the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. And I wish to point out from the onset that our report aligns largely with the reports read by the ECOWAS, AU, and Commonwealth. And so I don't intend to inflict this whole report on you, because I'll be saying virtually the same things that my colleagues have said. And so I'm just going to pick and choose a few interesting points so that at the end of the whole process, we'll give you a copy of it, and then you can update yourself with any further details that you want. So I'll start with the introduction. It says ASA deployed a short-term election observer mission to the 4th December 2021 presidential elections in the Gambia. It was comprised of 15 international observers from 13 African countries. The observer teams were deployed in 7 teams. The teams were 7 and were deployed to 6 regions to observe key processes, including the electoral campaigns, pre-polling, election day, and limited post-election activities. The mission will remain in the Gambia until the 9th December. This statement presents a summary of the preliminary findings, conclusions, and recommendations of the ASA International Election Observer Mission. It is being issued when the final results have been announced. The mission, however, notes that the final results sheet was signed by representatives of only 2 political parties. ASA will issue a final report covering the entire electoral process and recommendations for future improvements at a later date. The 4th December 2021 elections were the 6th elections to be held since the return to democratic rule following the 1994 military coup and the first in the post-Jammeh era. The mission notes the constitutional, electoral, institutional, transitional justice, and security sector reforms initiated by the government since 2017. Despite progress in initiating reforms, some of these reforms remain outstanding as at the time of the 2021 election. Discussions regarding a new constitution appear to have stalled, and the ASA International Election Observer Mission also notes that implementation of both security sector reforms and recommendations of the Jammeh Commission remain unresolved. The delay in submission of the TRRC report to the government has stalled delivery of justice, reparations, and overall reconciliation processes for the victims of atrocities allegedly committed during the Jammeh regime. The mission applauds progress in the provision and protection of human rights in the country through the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission. In the context of elections, granting the right of access to information by by enacting the Access to Information Law, enhances transparency in the process. You've been told about the legal framework. It's based on the 1997 Constitution as amended in 2001, and also the Electoral Act of 1996 as amended, and other guidelines. The electoral system is first past the post, and it has a 5-year presidential mandate. The Electoral Commission and other stakeholders consulted by ASA noted that the voting system in Gambia has the advantages of low cost and simplicity, both for understanding how to vote, and counting has extremely low chances of spoiled ballots. This system of voting is uniquely Gambian, and ASA observers reported that voters exhibited a high level of confidence in the system and its operation on election day. However, the mission notes that such a system might face challenges in the event of a large number of candidates, as provided for under the multi-party structure outlined in Gambia's legal framework. You have Preparedness of the Independent Electoral Commission. The IEC set up 1,554 polling stations. It recruited and trained 6,078 election staff. It also procured and distributed electoral materials and monitored campaign activities, including ensuring equality in access to and coverage by the public broadcaster. 4 petitions challenging the decision of the IEC during the voter registration and nomination periods were filed in courts prior to the elections. The outcome of the cases, as well as the failure by the IEC to implement some aspects of the rulings, undermine confidence in the EC's commitment to adhere to the rule of law. As a body created through the Constitution of the Republic of Gambia, the EC should be seen at all times, ensuring that rulings handed down through court judgments are respected and implemented in accordance with the law. I jump and then I go to voter registration. Voter registration was conducted from 29th May 2021 to 11th July 2021. On 12 July 2021, the EC released a provisional voters register with a total of 987,484 registered voters, and the register was displayed at the various registration centers from 16th to 29th August. It provided an opportunity for verification, objections, and appeals by the public, which is in line with the principles of transparency. The mission was informed that no objections and appeals were raised. The final voters register had a total of 962,157 voters, and of these, significantly, 545,318, constituting 56.67%, were female, while 416,839, constituting 43.32%, were male. Voters in the 18 to 35 age bracket comprised 57% of the total registered voters, signifying a youthful voter population in the Gambia. There was a total increase of 75,579 voters in the number of registered voters compared to 2016, when the total registered voters was 886,578. This implies an increase of 8.5%, and some people have expressed worry that that increase is a bit on the low side and probably does not properly reflect population growth rate. Let's see, we jump and go to, during the voters registration process, the legality and validity of the authority given to the mayor of Banjul to issue attestations for registration purposes was challenged. The court ruled that the mayor lacked the power to issue attestations, as the act was in contravention of the Elections Act. The mission noted that while attestations by the various authorities allows for inclusion in the voters registration process, it may be susceptible to manipulation if proper safeguards are not put in place. The mission noted that the number of registered voters during the national registration drive increased by 8.5%. I've said that already. It also says that the median age of the population is 17.8. the IEC was taken to court over disenfranchisement of over 200,000 Gambians in the diaspora. A Supreme Court ruling on 27 January ruled that they should be allowed to vote, as their continued disenfranchisement constitutes an infringement on their fundamental rights. Unfortunately, the EC was not able to implement this ruling of the court. A total of 26 candidates, 13 each from political parties and independents, presented their nomination documents. As you are aware, some candidates were disqualified, and the IEC validated the nomination of only 6 candidates. Unfortunately, one of those qualified was the only female candidate, and that is sad. We hope that in future this will be rectified so that we can see a higher female participation in not only voting but also as candidates in the elections. And this is considered particularly grievous because in the National Assembly only 9% of the members are women, and so participation by women is quite low. ASA mission expressed concern about the time allocated to scrutinize the nomination forms before the conclusion of the nomination process, limiting the opportunity to verify the bona fides of all contesting candidates. This restricted the right of access to information and ultimately impacted on the transparency of the process. In addition, the period between nomination and start of campaign was only 2 days, further impacting on the right to effectively remedy, as it did not provide ample time for filing and adjudication of petitions. I go to campaigns. The mission commends the EC and the police for providing sufficient security to all the candidates. Police officers were visibly present during most campaign activities and undertook their duties professionally. The period of silence and no campaigning, which started on Thursday, 2nd December at midnight, was complied with in all the areas where our observers were deployed. Media environment, freedom of speech and of expression, which includes freedom of the press and other media, is guaranteed in the Gambian Constitution. The mission notes that Gambia's media landscape has been diversified and has opened up since the post-Jammeh era. The mission commends equal coverage of campaign activities to all contesting candidates and the overall compliance by the media with the rules issued by the EC. The Gambian radio and television services equally allocated free airtime to all candidates during campaign as prescribed by law. You've been told about persons living with disability. Participation is low. Women's participation is also low. Civil society organizations. Gambia has a robust civil society which operates in a relatively free space compared to the previous era. The CSOs actively participated in the electoral process through voter education, peace building, domestic observation, and setting up of situation rooms to ensure peaceful elections through data collection, analysis, and mitigation, and were able to operate without any restrictions. The IEC accredited CSOs to observe the election, and ASA observers reported the presence of domestic observers in all the polling stations that we visited. So I jump and come to election day observations. The ASA team observed opening and counting procedures in 10 polling stations, and we monitored voting at 96 polling stations across 6 regions in the country. The election was held in a generally calm and peaceful environment. Most polling stations opened on time with no significant delays reported. All opening procedures, including display of empty ballot drums and correct sealing and placement of the boxes, were conducted professionally. Voting procedures were adhered to, with polling staff demonstrating a high level of competence and professionalism. Election materials were available in sufficient quantities throughout the voting process. Observers noted that over 90% of polling stations visited were accessible to people with disabilities, further enhancing inclusivity of the process. Elderly, pregnant, and nursing mothers were given priority at polling stations. Participation of women as election officials, party agents, and observers was on equal basis as men. Party and candidate agents were present in most polling stations visited and were well informed about the electoral process. The NPP and UDP consistently deployed agents at all polling stations where ASA observers were present. The cooperation and collaboration between party agents and EC officials was cordial and commendable. Domestic and international observation groups were present in most polling stations that we visited. They adhered to their roles and were able to perform their duties without any restriction. Security officials were present in all polling stations visited, adhering to their roles of safeguarding the election without interference or any impediment to the free participation of voters. All polling stations closed on time, and there were no reports of voters at the close of the poll not being permitted to vote. The process was conducted in a transparent manner, free of any irregularities. Polling officials demonstrated adequate knowledge of the procedures, indicating sufficient training. Procedures relating to reconciliation of used and unused marbles were adhered to and uniformly and consistently applied at all polling stations we visited. All party agents received copies of the results sheets, which were also posted on the walls at the designated polling stations. Conclusion. The ASA team commends the people of Gambia for conducting the elections in a peaceful and transparent manner. The mission encourages the country to maintain the good practices observed in this election. The mission has noted the final results of the election declared by the EC yesterday. We have also noted the objection raised by some presidential candidates to the results as declared. The mission appeals to all candidates to maintain the peace and use legally instituted channels to address any grievance that might arise. Recommendations. The government of the Republic of Gambia, sorry, not Ghana, definitely not Ghana, pardon me. The government of the Republic of Gambia should revise the constitutional review process in order to address the gaps in the legal framework for elections, and these include: 1, to consider the introduction of presidential term limits; 2, to review the suitability of the current first past the post system and consider a majority system of 50% plus 1 as a replacement; 3, to respond to calls for fundamental reform of the Election Act in line with regional and continental standards; 4, to provide for affirmative action to promote the participation and representative of the vulnerable and underrepresented groups such as women, youth, and people with disabilities; and then 5, to consider introduction of laws regulating campaign financing. We also urge the government of Gambia to implement the TRRC report recommendations to ensure justice and restitution for victims of the Jammeh era, and then also to fast-track implementation of security sector reforms and the report of the Anti-Corruption Commission. It should also consider the establishment of a permanent anti-corruption commission. And then finally, for the Electoral Commission to put in place requisite mechanisms to allow the diaspora to vote in the next election. And then secondly, to enhance the capacity of the Commission through setting up and staffing of a legal office and a statistics department in the Commission to enhance its work. I thank you very much for your attention.
Of the presence of the West African Elders Forum, which is a body that was launched earlier this year, comprising former presidents, former prime ministers, and former heads of the ECOWAS Commission. Following the launching of the Elders Forum and the constitution of its leadership, the Gambia elections offered the opportunity, the very first opportunity for the forum to begin to undertake actually members of the Elders Forum. On this occasion, His Excellency Goodluck Jonathan has been accompanied by the former Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, who also served as President of the ECOWAS Commission, Mr. Kadri Desiré Ouedraogo. And with this introduction, I'd like to invite His Excellency Goodluck Jonathan to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've done the work for me. Let me sincerely appreciate the former heads of states and heads of observation missions here with us. Let me appreciate the former president of ECOWAS, Ouedraogo, that is here with us. And let me appreciate General Biamzi, the Commissioner of Political Affairs, Peace and Security of ECOWAS, that led the ECOWAS team. Specifically, let me thank all, on behalf of the West African Elders Forum, thank all international observers for the interest shown in the Gambian election. And listening to your report, we are quite pleased that things are going very well. Let us thank ECOWAS for their leadership, because they host all these programs, and specifically, let me thank the outgoing Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, General Biamzi, that for his leadership. I think we've been together for more than a year now because of the Mali crisis from last quarter of last year, 2020, to throughout this year. We've been working on Mali. So I've known him, I've seen his competencies, and we listened to his remarks that was almost like a valedictory speech. So we wish him well in his future endeavors. I would have briefly made some remarks about the mission of the West African Elders Forum, but Professor has already explained. The West African Elders Forum is technically not an observation mission, and we don't intend to be an election observation mission. Our duty is preventive diplomacy, to get into countries, interact with the key stakeholders before elections, during the elections, and after the election, if there are issues. And since we arrived, we've been doing that. We really started work after the close of elections on Saturday. We have been interacting with the people, and we believe we'll succeed. Of course, when Obasanjo spoke, he made mention about 5 heads of states being here, and almost like the highest. But I'm quite pleased with that. And I have to thank the organizations that brought these 5 heads of states, ECOWAS, AU, the Commonwealth, ASA, for bringing former heads of state. Because I was here last year. It was international ideas that brought me when we were mediating the new constitution. And when I listened to the recommendations that you have all given, if that new constitution was adopted, almost 80 to 90% of the issues raised would have been accommodated. But because there was just one clause, I would say one clause, we can say one provision in the constitution that brought a stalemate. We had several meetings in the Gambia here, we moved the key stakeholders to Abuja, had meetings for 2 days. Just one provision we couldn't, and said, well, let us wait until after election. So because of that, for me, I was afraid that there could be major challenges during the election because of the inbuilt interest people had. Yes, at the end of the election, we noticed certain things yesterday, and we've been working on it. But to me, it's even better than I really envisaged because of the tension that one provision should. I believe we'll get over it. And generally, the Gambians are highly disciplined people. I appreciate them because I was here, we interacted with them. Yes, they disagree, but they disagree peacefully. And you can also observe that even in the fields, you hardly see voters or election observers having all kinds of arguments. You don't even observe underage voters like in some countries, including mine, that you will go and begin to query, is this person up to 18 years? And so on and so forth. You don't. So they are highly disciplined people, and I believe also the candidates, because all of them have that kind of DNA. So I believe at the end of the day, Gambia will be peaceful, and with the heads of states here and other very senior citizens of this world that are here, working with them, I believe that we'll be able to calm the situation down, and Gambia will begin to look towards a new government and plan for the parliamentary elections that are scheduled for April next year. They all agree from the interactions we have with the people even before the election that immediately after the parliamentary election, they will commence the new constitution. And some of the observations we have made now, I believe, if it is not already there, like as I said, 70% or more are already there. But the ones that are not already, I believe they will incorporate it in the new constitution. And probably by the time you come 2026, you will see a major improvement in the electoral processes in Gambia. So on behalf of the West African Elders Forum, I thank all of you for your coming to help these processes, wish people of the Gambia well, and also wish the international observers safe trip back home. Thank you all.
To all of the reports, it's been a very intense morning, but I would like to crave the indulgence of your excellencies after the presentation of these reports to check if there is any burning question from the media here present. So it has been very clear, and the recommendations, the findings and the recommendations are also fully grasped by those who have been part of this audience. And from the media? Okay, with your permission, there's one. I was going to close on that note, but yeah, please state your name and your organization.
Yeah, I am Babka Trawale. I'm a freelance photojournalist. I thank you very much for coming to the Gambia. And you have done a good job. We would like to comment on that. Your Excellency, you talk about term limit for presidency. But we've seen that Africa, it's a problem. This is a thing that needs to be considered so that the case of violence and other issues can be addressed. But what do you think is your recommendation for this term limit to be considered by the African head of states so that there could be peaceful and transparent manner in the country? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't think this is particularly addressed to any one of you. I wonder who would like to looks like President Mahama is ready to bite the bullet.
President Koroma is ahead, is
the chair.
And representing ECOWAS is the major host. So let him answer.
Let me start by thanking Baba, as we fondly call him. What he has demonstrated is typical Baba. On the issue of term limits, I believe that this is a matter that has engaged the discourse in ECOWAS. And as recent as a couple of weeks ago, ECOWAS was reviewing the protocol on good governance and democracy. The position as at now is that where you have a term limit, the countries must ensure that they adhere strictly to the provisions of the term limit. Where you don't have a term limit, as it is the case in the Gambia, it is left with the Gambians, when you do have the opportunity to review your constitution, to consider implementing the term limits. generally we hold the view that it gives, the term limits gives the voting population a choice. And to be fair, at the end of a president who is lucky to serve 2 terms, I don't see anything more you can offer beyond your 2 terms. I think the essence is to bow out. But I think we have implications there. There are times when people want to stay beyond their term limits because of the lack of guarantees of the life after the presidency. But I believe we have had a lot of past presidents that engage in doing so many other things. There is a call to address so many other issues that will deepen the democratic process, that will strengthen the ECOWAS sub-region. So we already have a life, an example of a life after the presidency and activities, possible engagements after the presidency. So that is why, to minimize the issues that will lead to a possible undemocratic disruption of governments, we have to ensure that it becomes the policy of ECOWAS to insist on term limits. Also, we should not only insist on term limits, we also have to look at the governance issues during anybody's presidency, because these are the early warning signs that are not adhered to. We have situations that gives the impressions of normalcy, but when you drill down in the individual countries, there are issues of human rights violations, there are issues of a trend towards becoming autocrats in our various countries, and there are issues of limiting the space of the the civil society, and treatments meted out to opposition, and the press leaves much to be desired. So I think in totality, term limits must be supported, but also issues of good governance must be continuously addressed at every step of the way. I hope that the Gambians will use this as an opportunity. You have a constitutional review ahead to address the issue of the term limits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very